Throughout history, there has existed a knowledge so powerful that only a few have managed to understand it. It's not found in conventional books, nor is it taught in universities. And yet its impact has changed lives, transformed minds, and elevated the spirit of those who have dared to explore it. This is the science of internal transformation, a discipline hidden behind symbols, metaphors, and cryptic texts that have survived the ages, waiting for someone with enough vision to decipher it. But here's a question few ask. What if this knowledge has always been within our reach, but no one has taught us how to see it? What if within each of us lies a dormant force, waiting to be awakened, capable of turning our shadows into light, our fears into wisdom, and our suffering into evolution? We're not talking about magic or baseless superstitions. We're talking about a real process, documented in humanity's oldest teachings, encoded in ancient texts, and practiced by those who have reached higher states of consciousness. For centuries, this knowledge has been reserved for a few. But today, here and now, we're going to reveal the principles that can change your perception of reality. And if you apply them, transform your life in ways you never imagined. From ancient civilizations to Renaissance sages, this art has been considered the master key to human evolution. In hidden temples, forgotten manuscripts, and legends that have survived the censorship of time, there's talk of a process of transmutation that goes beyond the physical, a process where the true gold isn't material, but internal. Imagine your mind as a crucible and your consciousness as the substance that must be refined. Imagine that every experience, every challenge, every crisis you've faced in your life is just part of an alchemical process that's shaping you, polishing you, and raising you toward your purest version. This teaching isn't just a metaphor, it's a map, a path walked by history's greatest spiritual masters, a path few dare to follow, but that has always been there, waiting for those ready to awaken. But before revealing how this process works and how you can apply it to your own life, it's important to understand something. Transformation isn't an event, it's a journey. And like any journey, there are stages to go through. You can't skip steps, you can't take shortcuts. True evolution requires moving through each phase with determination and courage. Because here's a truth few tell you. To be reborn, you first have to die. Every deep change begins with a crisis, a collapse of the old, a moment when what you took for granted crumbles before your eyes, and you're forced to face who you really are. This is the first stage of the process, a breaking point where illusions vanish, where the ego confronts its own falsehood, where the identity you thought you had is put to the test. It can show up in many ways: a loss, a failure, a painful awakening to reality. It's that moment when you realize things aren't what you thought, when what felt secure fades away, and you face the void. It's a process most people fear, but it's necessary. Because only when everything you're not falls apart can you start to discover who you really are. This is the point where many give up, where fear paralyzes them, and they return to their old ways of thinking and acting. But here's the key. What seems like the end is actually the beginning. You're not being destroyed, you're being refined. Every fragment of your old identity that dissolves is making way for something greater, more authentic, more aligned with your true essence. And this is where hidden knowledge comes into play. Those who walked this path before us left clues, signs encoded in ancient teachings, for those who were ready to use them as a guide. They knew that after the initial chaos comes purification, a stage where the impurities of the mind and spirit start to dissolve, where clarity begins to emerge, where the noise of distractions fades and you start to see with new eyes. But there's something you must understand. This process isn't automatic. It doesn't happen just because. It requires intention, it requires discipline, it requires practice. Knowing it isn't enough, you have to experience it. And this is where many fail, because they look for external answers when true transformation can only come from within. Now, I want you to think about this. How many times have you felt there's something beyond what you can see? How many times have you sensed a hidden truth waiting to be uncovered? If you're here listening to this, it's not a coincidence. There's something inside you ready to awaken, but only you can take the next step. And before we go on, I want you to leave a comment with what's resonated with you the most so far. Have you ever felt like you were going through a deep transformation in your life? Have you experienced a crisis that later led to greater understanding? I want to read you and know how this message connects with your experience. Also, if this knowledge interests you, make sure to subscribe because what comes next is the most important part of the process, the practical application. In the next phase of this journey, we'll explore how you can use these principles in your daily life, how you can speed up your evolution, how you can transform your mind, your energy, and your consciousness in a real and effective way. Because knowing it isn't enough, you have to live it. Now that you've understood that transformation isn't an event but a process, it's time to dive deeper. Because this is where most people fail. They think that just wanting change will make it happen. They believe they can evolve without going through the fire, without letting go of the old, without facing what they've avoided their whole lives. But the truth is, there's no light without darkness, no awakening without confrontation, no growth without surrender. The second stage of this process is purification. It's the moment when everything you're not starts to peel away. Limiting beliefs, inherited fears, repressed emotions, the stories you've told yourself about who you are and what you can achieve, all of that begins to dissolve. And while it might seem like a relief, it's actually one of the most challenging phases. Why? Because this is where you face the part of you that's been in the shadows, the part that's been conditioned, manipulated, and shaped by your environment. The part that's learned to live in fear, complacency, and conformity. And when you start to let all that go, the ego panics. It tries to cling to what's familiar, even if what's familiar is a prison. And this is where most people stop. Because the ego tells you to go back, to return to the comfort of the known, that it's easier to stay as you've always been than to face the uncertainty of change. But if you're willing to push through this phase, you'll discover something few ever experience, true freedom, because purification isn't just about letting go of what limits you. It's about learning to see life with new eyes. It's as if you'd lived your whole life in a house with dirty windows, and suddenly someone cleaned them. What once seemed dark now lights up. What once felt impossible now becomes reachable. And what once defined you no longer has power over you. But here's the key. It's not enough to get rid of the old. You have to build the new. It's not enough to free yourself from what's held you back. You have to fill that space with something greater. And this is where the real internal alchemy begins, because the next phase of the process is integration. Integration is the point where you start to rebuild yourself, where you take everything you've learned, everything you've let go of, everything you've experienced, and use it as the foundation for your new reality. It's the moment when you stop seeing spirituality as something external and turn it into your way of living. It's not a concept. It's not a theory. It's a direct experience. And this is where the tools come in. Because real transformation doesn't happen just with intellectual understanding. It happens when you live the teaching, when you practice it, when you apply it to every aspect of your life. So pay attention, because what comes next is what can make the difference between simply knowing this knowledge or truly experiencing it. First, self-observation. Without this practice, nothing you learn will matter much. Self-observation is the ability to see yourself in real time, to recognize your patterns, to notice when the ego takes control, when fear kicks in, when emotions overwhelm you. It's a habit you need to build every day. How? Through a consciousness journal. Write every night what you noticed about yourself during the day. What emotions came up, what repetitive thoughts appeared, how you reacted to situations. This simple exercise makes a huge difference because it pulls you out of autopilot and makes you aware of yourself. Second, shadow work. If you don't integrate the parts of yourself you've repressed, they'll keep controlling you from the background. Carl Jung said that what isn't made conscious will show up in your life as fate. This means that everything you deny about yourself, everything you don't want to see, will reflect in your experiences until you face it. And this is where meditation, introspection, and therapy can help. Not to eliminate the shadow, but to integrate it, to make it part of your consciousness instead of letting it rule you from the shadows. Third, energetic purification. Our body and mind are loaded with emotional and mental residue. Practices like fasting, herbal baths, Burning negative thoughts on paper, deep breathing, and connecting with nature help clear those burdens and ease the transformation process. These aren't superstitions. They're tools used for millennia by various spiritual traditions because they work. Fourth, expanding consciousness. This is where knowledge turns into wisdom. And it's not just about reading or studying, it's about applying what you learn in daily life. How you act in your relationships, how you handle adversity, how you make decisions. Every choice you make is a test of your level of evolution. There's no better teacher than life itself. But here's the most important part. This process has no end. There's no point where you can say, I'm done. Transformation is ongoing. Evolution is infinite. And this is something the great sages understood. Awakening isn't a destination. It's a way of walking. And before we move to the final phase of the process, I want you to do something. I want you to comment which of these tools you feel you need to apply most in your life. Is it self-observation, shadow work, energetic purification? Leave it in the comments because I want to know how this knowledge is resonating with you. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, because in the last part of this video, we'll reveal the final stage of this process, the crystallization of transformation, the point where everything you've learned becomes a new way of being. That's where the real power lies. Don't miss it. We've reached the crucial point of this process. You've seen how internal transformation isn't an event but a journey that starts with the destruction of the old, continues with the purification of what remains, and solidifies in the integration of a new consciousness. But there's one last phase, the most important of all, because without it, everything before stays as ideas, concepts, empty promises. This is the crystallization, the moment when you stop being a seeker and become a master of your own life. Not in the sense of collecting titles or external validation, but in the sense of having turned transformation into your natural state. This is where the true awakening happens. Look around you. Most people live trapped in repetitive patterns, in cycles of suffering, in mental prisons they've built with their own beliefs. They keep reacting the same way, feeling the same fears, being pulled by the same emotions over and over again. And the worst part is, they don't even realize it. But you're not that person anymore. If you've made it this far, it means something in you has already changed. Because the mere fact of being aware of this process is a sign that you've crossed a threshold there's no turning back from. But here's the question. What will you do with this knowledge? Because understanding it isn't enough. Learning it isn't enough. What really matters is how you apply it, how you turn it into your way of living, how you reflect it in every action, every word, every thought. Because at this point, transformation stops being just internal work and starts manifesting externally. And here's something very few people understand. Your outer world is just a reflection of your inner state. If there's chaos in your life, it's because there's chaos in your mind. If there are limitations in your reality, it's because there are limitations in your perception. If there's conflict in your relationships, it's because there are still fragments of yourself you haven't integrated. And the opposite is true too. When your mind is at peace, your life flows. When your perception expands, opportunities appear. When you heal your interior, the world responds accordingly. This isn't a theory, it's a law taught by all the great spiritual traditions of history under different names and forms. But the essence is the same. What you are inside reflects outside. And this is where we reach the point of materialization. Because in this final phase of the process, it's not just about internal transformation anymore. It's about conscious creation. It's about realizing that you're the architect of your own reality, and that every decision you make, every intention you set, every action you take is shaping your world in a way much deeper than you've been led to believe. This is where the true alchemists stand apart from the rest, because they've not only learned to change themselves, they've learned to change the reality around them. Not through manipulation, but through internal mastery, from a state where they're no longer victims of circumstances, but creators of their destiny. But this phase comes with great responsibility, because once you know you can shape your life with your own energy, you can't blame anyone else anymore. You can't play the victim anymore. You can't hold on to excuses anymore. Now you understand that every choice matters, every thought matters, Every action has an impact. And here comes the real test. What will you do with this power? Some people, when they reach this point, feel fear. Fear of taking full responsibility for their lives. Fear of letting go of old stories. Fear of admitting they've always had control but just hadn't accepted it. But there are others who get it, who take the step, who dare to live with total awareness, who stop waiting for external miracles and become their own miracle, who no longer seek the light outside because they've discovered the light was always within them. And you, which group will you be in? The answer isn't in what you say, but in what you do from now on, in how you decide to apply this knowledge in your life, in how much you're willing to commit to your own evolution. Because here's the final truth. No one else can do it for you, but if you choose to do it, if you commit to this process, you'll discover something that will change your life forever. The alchemical gold was never a metal. It was always you, your potential, your essence, your true self, waiting to be freed from the layers of conditioning, fear, and limitation it's been trapped in. And now the final question, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Let me know in the comments. I want to read your answer. I want to know where you are in this process. I want to know which part of this message resonated with you the most. And if this content has sparked something inside you, subscribe, because this is just the beginning. Here, we'll keep exploring the mysteries of existence, the keys to transformation, and the tools that can change your perception of reality. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.